Well, hey everybody. Hope you're doing well and have had a good week. Have good plans for the weekend to keep yourself busy and out of mischief. I can't say that I have anything great planned, but I'm sure I'll find something to do that will keep me out of the pokey. Anyway, today we're going to have a look at a piece of interesting history from the United States. But first, a reminder to all of you who live in the prairie areas of Canada, or in the northern U.S., if you will, depending how far you'd like to travel. July 23rd is a YouTube Creators Meet and Greet in Winnipeg, Manitoba. It will be held at St. Vitel's Park from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with a potluck luncheon at 12 noon. If you're coming in from out of town, it's up to you if you want to provide something for the potluck or not. According to Drive Shaft Drew, who's spearheading the thing, you don't have to. But I always feel it's incumbent upon me when I go to a potluck to do my fair share. So even though I'm driving to Winnipeg from Regina, Saskatchewan, I plan to take my little bit along to contribute. But anyway, it should be a fun time, and if you're free that Saturday, plan to attend. If you want more information or want to see how to get to St. Vitel's Park, you can go to Drive Shaft Drew's channel, and he just recently put up a video with a kind of drive-through of the park showing the exact location where the meet and greet will be held. So I'll put Drive Shaft Drew's link in the description box and you can check it out. Now, to today's subject matter. I remember in 1964, when I was a young lad of about 9-10 years old, going to see a movie that had just been released. And great movie it was. John Wayne was the main character. He played a owner of a circus. And the one scene I remember from the movie is he's taking his circus to Europe, and so they've loaded on board a ship. And something happens on shore, and everybody on the deck of the ship rushed to one side to see what was happening, causing the whole weight in the ship to shift, and the ship capsizes. Now, that was a fictional story, and the rest of the film carries on from there. As I recall, that scene happened fairly early on in the movie. Anyway, I always, for some reason, that scene stuck in my mind. But if you were a person from Chicago in 1964, that might have hit a little bit close to home, because something similar happened in Chicago in 1915. Let's take a look, shall we? July 24th, 1915 was going to be a special day for thousands of Chicagoans. It was reserved for the Western Electric Company's annual summer picnic, which was to be held across Lake Michigan in Michigan City, Indiana. Although officials of the utility company had encouraged workers to bring along friends and relatives, they were surprised when more than 7,000 people arrived to be ferried across the lake on 5 excursion boats chartered for the day. 3 of the steamers, the Theodore Roosevelt, the Petoskey, and the Eastland, were docked on the Chicago River near Clark Street. On this fateful morning, the Eastland, a steamer owned by the St. Joseph Chicago Steamship Company, was filled to its limit. The boat had a reputation for top-heaviness and instability, and the new Federal Seamen's Act, which was passed in 1915 as a result of the RMS Titanic disaster, required more lifeboats than previous regulations did. All of this resulted in the ship being even more unstable than it already was. In essence, it was a recipe for disaster. As passengers boarded the Eastland, it began listing back and forth. This had happened on the ship before, so the crew emptied the ballast compartments to provide more stability. As the boat was preparing to depart, some passengers went below deck, hoping to warm up on the cool, cloudy morning. But many on the overcrowded steamer jammed their way onto the one side of the deck to wave to onlookers on shore. The Eastland tilted once again, but this time more severely. Passengers began to panic. Moments later, the Eastland rolled to her side, coming to rest at the bottom of the river, which was just 18 feet below the surface. One side of the boat's hull was actually above the water's surface in some spots. Passengers on deck were tossed into the river. The overturned ship created a current that pulled some of the floundering swimmers to their doom, while many of the women's dresses snagged on the ship, tugging them down to the bottom. Those inside were thrown to one side of the ship when it capsized. The heavy furniture on board crushed some passengers, and those who were not killed drowned when the water rushed in moments later. A few managed to escape, but most didn't. Their bodies were later found trapped in a tangled heap in the lowest side of the Eastland. Firefighters, rescue workers, and volunteers soon arrived and tried to help people escape through portholes. They also cut holes in the portion of the ship's hull that was above the water. Approximately 1,660 passengers survived the disaster. But in the end, 844 people died, many of them young women and children. Officially, no clear explanation was given for why the vessel capsized, and the St. Joseph Chicago Steamship Company was not held accountable for the disaster. The bodies of those who perished in the tragedy were wrapped in sheets and placed on the Theodore Roosevelt or lined up along the docks. Marshall Field's and other large stores sent wagons to carry the dead to hospitals, funeral homes, and a makeshift morgue at the 2nd Regiment Armory, where more than 200 bodies were sent. After the ship was removed from the river, it was sold and later became a U.S. warship as the gunboat USS Wilmot. The ship never saw any action, but was used as a training ship during World War II. After the war, it was decommissioned and eventually scrapped in 1947. At the time of the Eastland disaster, the 2nd Regiment Armory, located on the near west side, was the only public building large enough to be used as a temporary morgue. Chicagoans with missing loved ones filed through searching for familiar faces. In 22 cases, there was no one left to identify them. Those families were completely wiped out. The names of these victims were learned from neighbors who came searching for their friends. The weeping, crying, and moaning of the bereaved echoed off the walls of the Armory for days. As years passed, the Armory building went through several incarnations, including a stable and a bowling alley, before Harpo Studios, the production company owned by talk show maven Oprah Winfrey, purchased it. A number of Oprah Winfrey Show staff members, security guards, and maintenance workers claim that the studio is haunted by spirits of those who tragically lost their lives on the Eastland. Many employees have experienced unexplained phenomena, including the sighting of a woman in a long gray dress who walks the corridors, then mysteriously vanishes into a wall. Some believe she is the spirit of a mourner who came to the Armory looking for her family and left a bit of herself behind at a place where she felt her greatest sense of loss. Staff members have also witnessed doors opening and closing on their own and heard sobbing sounds and phantom footsteps on the lobby staircase. In the same way that the former Armory seems to have been impressed with a ghostly recording of past events, the Chicago River seems haunted too. For years, people walking the Clark Street Bridge have heard crying and moaning sounds coming from the river. Some have witnessed the apparitions of victims splashing in the water. On several occasions, some witnesses have called the police for help. One man even jumped into the river to save what he thought was a person drowning. When he returned to the surface, he discovered he was in the water all alone. He had no explanation for what he'd seen, other than to admit that it might have been a ghost. So it seems that the horror of the Eastland disaster has left an imprint on these spots and continues to replay itself, ensuring that the Eastland victims will never be forgotten. So there you have it. So you can kind of see why that story of the Eastland makes me think of the scene from the beginning of Circus World. If you'd been in your early teens or even perhaps up through your early 20s, you were probably still around in 1964 when this movie came out and had been alive and probably would have remembered the Eastland disaster. Alrighty. after having that rather sober story time, I suppose you would like something a little more lighthearted, a little levity. Well, how about a groaner? Yeah? Okay. Well, let's stick to the same theme, shall we? There's three buddies having a beer together and chit-chatting about the good old days, and one of them said, "Yeah, I remember how I learned to swim." He says, "There was a lifeguard at the pool, a beautiful, beautiful woman, and I didn't know how to swim, but I was so enthralled with her that when she tried to encourage me to learn how to swim, boy, I jumped right in and gave it all I had because I wanted to impress her." And the second fellow shares his story about how he learned to swim in the river near his parents' home, along with his brothers and sisters, and it was his grandfather that taught him how to swim. The third fellow says, "Well, I learned to swim the old-fashioned way. My dad put me in a rowboat, rowed out to the middle of the lake, and threw me in. Left me there. I learned to swim real fast, and I tell you, that swim back to shore about did me in, but the worst part was getting out of the gunny sack." Oh dear, even that groaner was a little maudlin. Alrighty, well, I hope you've enjoyed today's story time and that little bit of history from Chicago, USA. I hope you'll have a great weekend and tune in on Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time for Tuesdays with the Pilgrim. Until then, take care, stay safe, and God bless.